in hospital, there was all this sort of confusion. I wasn't sleeping. I had already started the not sleeping in hospital. I was having a lot of problems with Valentina latching. So, I just it all wasn't coming together the way that I felt. So then immediately what happened was I felt out of control from the very beginning, from, probably day 1 or 2.
As we touched on in episode 1, you had a really difficult time after the birth of your first baby, Valentina. Mm-hmm. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what happened, how that all unfolded?
Yeah. So just to, I suppose, paint a bit of a picture, I was pregnant with Valentina and I had a beautiful pregnancy. Like, I was glowing all the time. My hair was thicker than it is now, believe it or not. And I had an amazing pregnancy. And I focused so much on the care in my pregnancy and then focused on the birth because I was really nervous and quite terrified to give birth for the first time.
Yeah.
But then a few months before I was going to give birth, I thought it would be a great idea to start a business. Yeah. And I had this concept of, I'll just be at home and, I'll do this and do that. So I started a business from home and then I had Valentina probably 5 or 6 months after I had started that.
What was the business?
It was Two Birds Consulting, and it's still going today from what I understand and still very successful. Mm-hmm. But, we started it just as something that I thought I would do from home while I had, my firstborn, and it would just be really nice.
Yeah, your baby's just sleeping next to you while you...
I had that visual, right? And then my husband also decided to start his construction company as well.
Did he start that when you were pregnant with Valentina? I didn't realise that. Oh, my goodness me.
So we both started businesses. He was a little more advanced than I was. But, so, the benefit of hindsight, hey?
I mean, pregnant people do so many crazy things, like moving house, starting businesses, renos.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And you do it, right? And there's always a reason why, Mm-hmm. And then, so then I had Valentina and...
How was your birth?
My birth at the time, I was like, okay, I was 40 and 5.
Yep.
And then my obstetrician was like, look, I think you need to be induced. So I was induced and it was just not, it was just not a nice experience. And my body just never, with both pregnancies actually, my body did not know how to naturally go into labour. Mm-hmm. So I was induced both times. But I was induced with Valentina. She was fine. There's lots of things around that I would do very differently. Mm-hmm. However, she was healthy. I was fine. And that was sort of the main thing.
Yeah.
And then I think it just, the fog started to come down. Mm-hmm. And, even in the hospital, that was a very confusing time for me. I think back to the state of my nervous system, and I do a lot of nervous system work now with my beautiful Divya. And I just think my nervous system was shot from the minute I gave birth. And this pressure that I put on myself. So I had gone and read, all the books. I had all the books
Which
read.
Books?
Yeah, well, I don't know if we can say them. you know, and I was like, okay, so by day 7 she'll be doing this and she'll be sleeping this way and right. And I took that book to hospital with me. That's how prescriptive.
It's a very problematic book that I truly, from the bottom of my heart, believe should be banned.
Yeah.
Especially with the most current research that's coming out about neurological development in infants. But anyway, you didn't know. Most people don't know.
I didn't know, and I still think this is a very current situation that from when I speak to women, and also the research and survey that I did in early 2022, this is still happening.
Oh, yeah, and that book is still on people's shelves.
Yeah.
And, it's...
Yeah.
And on their bedside tables.
Yeah. So, you know, I had all of these expectations, be it right or wrong, that my newborn baby was going to do everything that this book said.
Yeah.
And I just, it was so far from what any book, right? And not even that particular book that I had with me, any book told me or tried to guide me or support me, because I'm sure that that's their intention, right? There's always an intention that books are put out with, and I'm sure that it was one that was like, well, we want to help mothers, but it really, I feel like it set me up a bit for failure.
Yeah.
So in the hospital, it was really difficult because I had conflicting opinions from midwives on what to do and how to care for my child.
Yeah, that's a huge issue.
It is a huge issue and still something today. However, you know, midwives are amazing human beings and they are there to care for people. And I just think that in the process of the system, it all gets a bit discombobulated.
Yeah, well, there's the translational lag, which is approximately 17 years from the time something gets scientifically proven to the time that it becomes common practice. And I look at especially midwives in Australia at the moment, they're so overworked. That everyone's leaving their jobs. You know, the system is so messed up. And in an ideal world, we would have jobs that gave 2 hours a week or whatever it is that people need for professional development, so they can be staying up to date with the most current research. But that's not a reality, and because of that, so many mums come home from the hospital so confused because they get so much conflicting advice.
Yeah,
and they just don't know who to listen to.
Yeah,
and a lot of them don't know how to tune in.
No, I'd lost all sense of self but also because the person that I was then was constantly looking to external authorities to tell me how to care for my child, which now I'm probably so far gone the other way now. So in hospital, there was all this sort of confusion. I wasn't sleeping. I had already started the not sleeping in hospital. I was having a lot of problems with Valentina latching. I just wasn't, it all wasn't coming together the way that I felt. So then immediately what happened was I felt out of control from the very beginning, from, probably day 1 or 2.
And did you have any idea about doulas or postpartum care or how to care for yourself when you got home?
Postpartum was probably not even a word that I knew of at all, because I had focused so much on the pregnancy and then the birth. I had no concept of the postpartum period. I had no idea what a doula was. I just knew the system, that I was going to have my baby in hospital. That was the safest thing to do, and that then I was going to come home and be a mum.
And run your business while raising a newborn
and
baby.
And my business while,
And recovering from birth.
And look, I was the person that I was then was all about the successful business, the material things around me, and that was a representation of my success. And, we all get caught up in it in some way, shape or form.
Definitely.
And, I don't regret that person that I was, because it's brought me to where I am now.
Yeah,
and,
it's all part of your journey.
It is.
Yeah.
So then, I sort of came home and, I was like, okay, so, right, what do we do? And I remember Valentina's nursery, and John and I often will just cackle ourselves laughing at. We had this wallpaper throughout her room, and it was like pink and white kaleidoscope wallpaper. And I'll never forget when we finally got a mothercraft nurse in, and she said, my God, you need to get this wallpaper down, this poor child. And it was just another thing. I was like, oh, do the nursery up beautiful.
Yeah.
It was just all about the things.
Was Pinterest a thing back then, 10 years ago?
I can't even remember.
Yeah,
I wasn't on it,
days,
even if it was.
there's so much focus on the Pinterest nursery, and I just feel like it's just...
Yeah, bare walls and love. That's all you need.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then it just sort of all escalated. I still felt like I didn't quite know what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And then as the days progressed, that feeling got more and more and more. And I didn't feel like I could actually... I felt like I needed to be doing the washing, having people over, preparing, doing cups of tea, sitting there with my child, and it was just all of this external perception that that's what I thought I needed to be doing, and that's who I needed to be. And it just the fog just kept getting heavier and heavier.
And you weren't sleeping, right?
Yeah, no, from day one, I think, I would have been lucky to get 2 hours sleep, and that was probably broken. And I would have those moments where I would, the shower would kind of become that space where no one could see me cry because I was covered in water. So, that was my space where I'd just like what am I doing? Like, genuinely, what am I doing? And I remember very vividly having that moment of, where is this mother's instinct? What's wrong with me? It gets me a bit emotional now. Because I remember thinking, I failed at this.
You didn't fail. The system failed you.
But, that sense of like... not having that feeling and watching everyone around you go, you're doing such a good job. And it was just this face.
Yeah.
The face and the persona that you put on, And I just continued. I continued that story and that facade. And I just got to some really dark places. And I wasn't sleeping. And of course, all of that stress was having a direct impact on my ability to breastfeed.
Of course.
So she just wasn't getting, it was very watery, my milk. There wasn't a lot there. I was doing everything to try and bring milk in because that was another layer of failure. And then I think I called the hospital and I said, look, I didn't even know who to call.
Yeah.
I didn't know that there were lactation consultants. And so I think I called the hospital and they said, oh, we've got a lactation clinic here. Didn't any of the midwives tell you when you were in hospital? I'm like, no. Like, I had no idea.
Yeah.
So
and this is coming from a very intelligent, well-resourced woman, and if you didn't have...
yeah.
And this is the thing, like, if you don't know that this exists, how is everyone else supposed to know? Like, it's just...
So then I went to the lactation clinic, was there for the, 5 or 6 hours or whatever it was. And, I kind of got the gist of it and I was like, okay, so went home. And already by that stage, I was having to have nipple shields and everything. Like, it was quite painful. And then came home and kind of just persisted because I was like, no, I have to breastfeed because I can't formula feed. Like that's just not the done thing. I have to breastfeed. And even, after a long time after when, probably 12 months after when I was going through talk therapy, I would talk to John and he was like, I'm sorry. Because I also thought you had to breastfeed. And I feel like I added a layer of pressure onto you because that's just what I thought as well. So there's so many aspects of this that affect your partner as well. And then I think we spoke about this story, you don't get a mother's group till 6 weeks. I was so far gone at 6 weeks. And when I say so far gone, like I was struggling to string a sentence together in a coherent manner, right? Because I had to be on. I had to be like, no, I'm fine. This is good. Like, yeah, I'm a mum and I'm 6 weeks in. And by that 6 weeks in, Valentina really wasn't getting fed properly. So I think John and I were like, we just have to give her a little bit of formula, but we'll just do it at home where kind of no one really sees or whatever. And I remember I went to that first mother's group meeting and I thought, I'll put a bottle of formula in the bag, but if no one else gets out a bottle, there's no way I'm getting out this bottle. And by that stage, I was in a lot of pain breastfeeding, like to the point where like I was just bleeding most of the time. And so I went to the mother's group meeting and I was like, okay. And not one of them got out a bottle. So I was like, okay, I have to do this. So I literally remember just taking a breath, putting Valentina on my boob and my toes just curled up from the pain. And I was like, just smile. Like this is just something you do all the time. And, we were still not latching properly. It was just a mess. It was just a mess. And then I left there and I just cried all the way home, pushing the pram, got home, kept crying. Like it was just horrible. It was just a really horrible experience. And then pretty much there was just more of the same as that happened throughout the months. I think there were many periods of hours across days that I didn't sleep because when I wasn't trying to breastfeed Valentina, I was trying to pump. And it was just hard. It was just difficult. So I would try and feed her for like 45 minutes and then I would put her down, but she wasn't really getting past a 45-minute sleep cycle ever, day or night. Yeah. So by the time I'd put her down, I'd go and pump a bit. She'd be a little bit unsettled. I'd have to stop pumping, go back, sort of settle her a bit, get her into that next sleep cycle, go back, repump. And I always remember thinking, who else would be up in the 4 a.m.s? Who else would be up at 4 o'clock in the morning? And I'm like, okay, nurses would be, ambulance drivers, fire. Like this was the stuff that I was trying to console myself with, that you're not the only person in the world who's up at this time.
Yeah.
Like there are other people.
There's so many mums as well, and...
But I felt so alone that those thoughts of other mums will be doing this didn't even enter I was just in this bubble of fog and depth that I just didn't have any other kind of concept of what else was going on outside of my walls. And then I very, very vividly remember it was probably, I stretched myself to almost 6 months of no sleep. by that stage, we had just decided that I couldn't breastfeed because I was just a mess. Physically, breast-wise, I was a mess. Like, it was just not a pretty sight. And the maternal health nurse said, just feed your baby formula, like it's okay.
Yeah.
And I still tried to do both for a period of time because I was still like, no, I just need to give her a little bit of breast milk, so I'm doing the right thing. But then it was about 5.5 months, and I said to John, I'm not good.
Yeah.
I'm starting to think about hurting myself to be able to go to hospital to have a break from this. And I don't think that's something that I should be thinking about actually doing. And he was like, God, no, no. So he then spoke, I'm pretty sure he then spoke to a very good friend of ours. And then, they're actually Valentina's godparents now, Mark and Anna. Anna knew of a woman, Kate Gillen, who very literally saved my life. And poor Valentina, she was so tired. The poor darling. And Kate came, and she wasn't just sleep. So that was one thing that I really loved about Kate as well. It was a bit of everything. It was sleep, nutrition, play. And I had just never had the exposure to that full circle and how it all actually works together. They are not isolated things. So, then we went through at the time a whole sort of the controlled crying approach, which, I would probably do differently now. But at the time, that's what we knew and that's what we needed.
This is going back 10 years. It was
Valentina
kind of
will
the
be
norm,
11 in February.
Yeah.
I had no concept of what a doula was. And quite honestly, it was probably only in the last sort of 4 to 5 years that I actually knew what a doula was. But my God, I would have paid anyone any amount of money, and even asked family and friends for money to pay for someone to help me.
Yeah.
If I knew that existed.
Yeah.
And then, so then it was a process of just getting us back on track. And of course, the biochemistry within my body was so out of whack by that stage that it took me a very long time to even just go to sleep.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't like, oh, okay, great, we've got, some help and bang, it's, all back on track. It took many, many months then to get to a place of like, okay, I feel like I could actually think a bit clearly, but it took a very long time. And then there was certainly, even after that, deep moments of depression that I was like, I've still failed. Like, I still needed someone to come in here and help me. Like, how could I not do this myself? And then you got to remember, like, I still had a business that I was trying to run as well. And my business partner, she was great through that period. Granted, I told no one how I was feeling. It was only when I got to that point and told John, but there wasn't anyone. Like, I didn't tell my mum. I didn't, tell anyone. And it's just that isolation that I felt. And I always remembered thinking, I just don't understand how there's not somewhere that I can go and be cared for. And how I can't stay somewhere, even just for a week.
Yeah. And
someone be there.
For respite and care and encouragement.
For care. And I remember, nutritionally, I was barely eating.
Yeah.
And I remember I would just anything that was sugar,
Yeah.
that kept me going,
Yeah.
you know. But it was just such a period of feeling so out of control. And for someone who is very in control, and part of what my business was controlling and managing other people's businesses, right? So I had this sense of I was well put together. So why could I not put this together?
Yeah.
Why was this not working for me? And the facade was the hardest thing to carry on through all of it.
So you've got 2 children.
I do.
So how did this experience with your first child inform your second
To go back again.
postpartum? Did you do things differently the second time around?
Yes. So I knew very early on, after I could kind of think straight, that I wanted more children, and so did John, and that I wanted a very different experience, in so much as the after. I was not focused on the birth, the pregnancy itself, that all, because again, it came back to that sense of control, like, well, I know that. And my pregnancy was fine, and, you know, and the birth will probably go very similar, or maybe not. But I was also I had more of a voice through that my second pregnancy as well. So, you know, I would say to the midwives, don't wait for me to throw up till you give me, you know, certain things. And, you know, this is my body's, I know my body now. This is how it's going to go. And so before we decided we wanted to have a second child, I took myself off to see a psychologist. And it was through that process that retrospectively I was diagnosed with postnatal depression and anxiety. Granted, I was probably, you know, half or 3/4 of the way coming out of that. But, you know, she certainly said if you had have come at that point in time, you know, you would have very much been put on medication and all the rest of it. So then my shift really for me was all about the after. And I just made a promise to myself that I was just going to let go. And that whatever was going to be, that's what was going to be.
Yeah.
And I was going to be okay.
Yeah.
And that took a lot because I had never historically trusted myself or felt that sense of safety within myself. So it was one point in my life where I had to back myself in. And I will never forget, my obstetrician came in the night after Sebastian was born, and I was watching the TV, having my hospital dinner, and I was cross-legged in bed, and Seb was just laying in my legs, and I was eating dinner, and he was sound asleep, and my obstetrician walked in and he said, sorry, am I in the right room? Who are you? Right? Because he even knew first time around that I was just completely different. And I was like, yeah, what will be, will be. We've let go a bit. So it was a very different experience with Sebastian. He slept through it 4 weeks to the point where I woke up and I was like, is he breathing? What's wrong? Like, you know. So it was a very, very different experience. And I think then the concept of home became that much more that I knew that there was another way. And, you know, I still went through very traditional methods with Sebastian, you know, still hospital birth and all the things.
Yeah. And there's still doulas, postpartum doulas still weren't really a thing then. He's 8.
I still didn't know about
really,
postpartum doulas. No. I just knew that I didn't even have the connection of postpartum being the after.
Yeah.
I would just reference it as after the birth.
Yeah.
This is how I want to be.
Yeah.
And I suppose that was, another driver for knowing that I wanted to create a space for women that was comfortable, warm, safe, nurturing, and that you have all of that support there with you all the time.
Yeah.
Because the nights are really lonely, right?
Yeah, they really are.
Nights are really lonely. So then I was, okay. Then I was like, okay, I'm going to scale my business to get it to a point where I don't need to actually be there, and then I'll go away and create this. But the universe had other ideas.
So, Larissa, I know that once this idea really started to take hold, you did a lot of research, and we're going to talk about that in the next episode.
A lot of research.
Yeah.
A lot of women's voices. We'll start letting them be heard.
This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and their guest speakers. Views and opinions expressed in the podcast are our own and do not represent that of our places of work. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and content here should not be taken as medical or professional advice. Please consult your healthcare professional for any personal recommendations and medical care. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate based on the best available information at the time of recording, we welcome any comments, suggestions or feedback via our website contact form, home.com.au/contact. Names and details of personal experiences may have been changed to allow for anonymity and privacy. To join the conversation, join us on social media at Home Postpartum.